Well, it was not good. It was not pretty. It was not anything to brag about. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast, everyone. The Bills falling in the opener 22 to 16 to a Jets team that didn't even have their star quarterback.
And I'm Jon Scott from MetLife Stadium, where we talk about the loss of one quarterback on one team, but I think it really falls on the shoulders, shockingly, I would say, Kevin, of the quarterback of the other team, that being the Bills.
Dude, the whole scenario is just crazy when you look at it. It's the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, 4 plays into his Jets career, gets injured, injures his ankle. But at the end of the day, you look at how Josh Allen and the Bills offense performed. It's like they were the ones with a rookie or an inexperienced quarterback out there for most of the game. We don't know while we're recording this exactly what the extent is of Aaron Rodgers' injury and what that means for the rest of the year. But John, as two dudes that cover the Bills for a living, I think we can both agree you could probably talk for a good hour about just what was wrong with Josh Allen and where he is in his career in an opening night game under the lights, New York City, all these scenarios you throw into a basket, and it's like Josh Allen thrives in them. Josh Allen, man, again, I know you and I had talked about this on the post-game show and offline. Maybe the worst game we've seen from him since his rookie year.
Yeah, I will say Robert Saleh, the Jets head coach, said after the game an MRI needs to confirm it, but they fear and are pretty certain it's an Achilles injury for Aaron Rodgers, which would mean his season is over, nearly before it even started with the Jets. As for Allen, with WTF, I think that's a phrase that you could use. I knew in the press box and I tweeted, what in the world is he doing? I did similar things the last season when they played here in this stadium and Josh Allen was throwing seemingly to people that it was clear as day were in his way and were Jets defenders and throws that had no chance of ever being completed. And lo and behold, we see that type of play coming out from Josh Allen here tonight. And he is so good in prime time. He is so good all the time in these types of performances. And that's what made this even more shocking. And I will say this, Kevin, week one is not a make or break. Overreaction theater is at its highest and its peak after week one or week two. Does this mean Josh Allen is no longer the superstar elite quarterback? No, but I will say, let's not forget the back half of last season, it wasn't just because of an arm injury. His decision making was poor the back half of the season, and he'd own it after every single game, say, I got to be better, I need to be smarter. Sean McDermott would say, we can't turn the ball over. And then it would happen once again. I'm not saying this is who Josh Allen is again, but this is who a lot of people thought Josh Allen was going to be at the early portion of his career. He bucked that for a year plus or so, but now it's starting to creep back in, and you just need Allen to be smarter with the football because maybe for the first time ever, he is the large reason this football team lost a game rather than the large reason they were even in it to begin with.
We always talk going into this weekend about the overreaction you're going to get from across the board in week one with teams that are supposed to be Super Bowl contenders losing. And a lot of them, your wild upset of the week was the Browns beating the Bengals, and you and I kind of laughed about it. But here we are, these chic teams that everyone was picking. And when you look at Josh Allen, I think there's people out there that are expecting some fall off, that maybe he jumped to a certain level, but that wasn't what the real Josh Allen is. And you're right, the way last season ended and the way this season began, you know, you're going to start getting those people come from out of the woodwork again. But I go back to 2 seasons ago against the Steelers when he looked bad against the Steelers to open the season. And everyone was saying, well, The year before was probably just a flash in the pan. This is the real Josh Allen again. And we all know what happened that season. He was able to right the ship. The team was able to right the ship. And they were, again, one of the more dominant teams around the NFL. So when you talk about overreaction from week one, you're going to get it. Should be interesting, John, to see all those power rankings come out on Tuesday afternoon, to see the Bills down at, number 20 or something like that.
To me, what's going to be really interesting about the instant reaction from this game, and even as we go through the week heading into next Sunday's game at home against the Raiders, is people actually openly criticizing Josh Allen, people openly and allowing themselves to point the finger directly at the superstar quarterback, something that really you don't ever seem to do. Even when he plays poorly, there are other places you can go. This one, there really aren't. There are some, but there aren't a lot here. I mean, Allen, if he doesn't turn it over 4 times, maybe if he only turns it over twice, it's not pretty, but they're going to sneak out of here with a week 1 W. How do people handle that? How does the team handle that? How does Josh Allen handle that? It's not something that this performance dictates what the rest of the year is going to be. Is going to derail not only Allen's season or the team's, but again, they just need to, and he needs to, be better, be smarter, and apparently that's something that we thought he had grown out of, that he has not.
I'm looking at some of my notes here, John, from the game. I have Allen sack, Spencer Brown, horrible. Dumb deep ball by Josh Allen. Another dumb deep ball by Josh Allen. And then I can't believe what Josh Allen is doing tonight on his 3rd interception, John. And I didn't even see the fumble. I got up to get some water, and I was like, all right, Bill's got the ball. Safe play coming. I'm going to go get some water. And next thing I know, there's some Jets fans in the building are all going, oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God, while I'm filling up my water. So it's one of those evenings with Josh Allen, and I look at some of his deep ball interceptions, John, and you could say he could have took something, the easier throw. I thought he seemed very indecisive at times, almost like he wanted to run to just pick up the first down, but it was in the back of his head. He was, well, I'm not supposed to be running as much anymore. I don't want to do it. Let me try and get this downfield with my arm. He just looked so indecisive throughout the entire game.
It was odd. Maybe uncomfortable would be another word that you could use. He seemed uncomfortable just taking what was easy underneath. He seemed uncomfortable in the pocket. There were times he tried staying in the pocket, and I'm thinking, how can you not tell when Spencer Brown's getting literally shoved into you and he's still standing tall, not even moving his feet? Other times, though, I don't know if he felt it, whether it was right or wrong, but he felt it. He seemed to be always flush from the pocket, not really comfortable staying in there very long. And as we indicated going into this game, the Jets' defensive front is very, very good, maybe in the conversation for the best and most talented in all of football. So you knew this was going to be a challenge for the Bills' offensive line. And even though they didn't perform over the top and weren't great, 5 sacks of Allen, I'm not going to put it all on the offensive line. You got to give those guys some credit as well, something Fred Jackson, from a player's perspective, likes to tell us often on the Buffalo End Zone post-game show. Allen just, again, it just is weird. So I think this, Kevin, I think it needs to be on Ken Dorsey, not from a play calling standpoint, but if you have such a great relationship with Josh Allen that's rooted for when he was the quarterback's coach, and then Allen's endorsement, a large reason Dorsey was promoted to fill the shoes of the departed Brian Daboll, then Dorsey needs to sit down with Allen, even as he's going into year 6 of his career, and say, listen, just let it come to you. Let's maybe focus more on underneath and just getting it out quickly to these guys and letting them do the work, because that's the easiest play. And you know what? The more you do that, it'll make the defense adjust. And then maybe these throws that he's trying to be Superman on, will actually in turn become easier as well. I know it is so counter to him, and you also don't want to put the shackles on him and take away what makes him so great. But there needs to be some sort of a balance, and it seems that not just tonight against the Jets in week 1 of the 2023 regular season, but even dating back to the back half of last year, Josh Allen has regressed in his decision making.
Yeah, I think if you look at the game plan, John, off the start of this game, we saw Deontay Hardy involved. We saw him lined up in the backfield. We saw quicker passes coming out and more players getting involved. But then it seemed like as the game went on, offensively speaking, you had James Cook running the ball and Josh Allen trying to force the ball to Stephon Diggs. And it was working, but eventually, when I look back on this game without going back through everything, just mentally off the top of my head, it was James Cook running and Stephon Diggs catching balls every now and then. And you and I had talked about going into the game wanting to see all these new weapons in the mix, and I don't think we saw that.
I mean, Josh is 29 of 41, but for 236, the touchdown, 3 interceptions. Cook, 12 attempts rushing for 46 yards, add into the mix 4 receptions for 17 yards on 6 targets. So they were trying to get Cook involved. Diggs, 10 receptions for 102 yards and a touchdown on 13 targets. But then everybody else, Davis, 4 targets, Kincaid, 4 targets, Knox, 4 targets, Damian Harris, 2 targets, Deontay Hardy, 4 targets, 3 catches for 9 yards, Latavius Murray, 2 targets. Where's Trent Sherfield? I know you're not necessarily going to go through the entire wide receiver group, but I feel like there needs to be a little bit more balance. But again, that's not necessarily all on Ken Dorsey. That's on the guy who has the football in his hands and decides where in the progression he's going to throw things. I think there could be a little bit of evolution on Ken Dorsey, but I went in back and forth with someone on Twitter after the game, and at the point where I said this, was when I truly thought this, and I still don't put it all on Dorsey, although the run play on 2nd and 15 in overtime was idiotic, to be honest with you. But beyond that, I don't put the struggles offensively and Josh Allen's issues on Ken Dorsey in this one. I think he can continue to get better and maybe have a better counterpunch. But the bottom line is the plays and the throws were there. Josh just didn't take them. He took the stupid ones, and it bit him.
You mentioned the overtime run play. I thought that happened a lot throughout this game, to be honest with you, that there were times where they were just handing the ball off and it didn't seem like the right down and distance it just didn't seem like the Bills offense we've grown accustomed to as far as, coming up with a play to convert on 3rd down. I think there was another play where they swung a pass out to Cook and I thought he had the first down easily. It ended up like 2.5 yards short of the first down. I think that was in the 4th quarter or maybe even overtime. But overall, James Cook looks to be like the guy that they want in the backfield, John. I just thought they were using him too much.
Yeah, there were some runs up the gut and things like that, maybe slower developing, and especially against a prolific defensive front. I understand the thought of you have to show some balance. You have to make them play a little tougher there. You can't let them necessarily just be blowing up field like that. But I agree with you. James Cook, though, from an evaluation on him, there were a couple moments, and there was one play, I forget where exactly in the game, but there was a defender right on him in the backfield, and it was, I think, 2nd or 3rd and short. And Cook was able to outrun the defender to the edge and turn what probably with Devin Singletary or other backs, even on the roster now, would have been a 2-3 yard loss, and it turned into a about 2-3 yard gain and gained the first down. You just see the explosiveness from him. I like getting him the ball in space and even on those swing passes, and it's not always every run going to boom, take off. But I agree with you. I didn't like all of the play calls, but not every run is going to be successful. 2nd and 15 in overtime, especially where they were in the field, is unacceptable. I don't really understand why that happened, but I'm like I've said before, I'm not going to pin a lot of the issues this evening on the offensive coordinator or them running the ball too much. We're just going to keep coming back to this. Josh Allen shouldering the load, and he should shoulder the most blame because he was downright awful.
And amazingly, they went to overtime and stayed in the game. They got the ball. They should have went down and punched it in. That makes it even more frustrating. Instead, they end up punting from deep in their own side of the field, and the Jets, Xavier Gibson, John, returns at 65 yards. Some guy who fought his way to be on the New York Jets 53-man roster ends up being the hero on a night that looked like it was going to be horrible for the Jets. It ends up being good for the Jets and horrible for the Bills.
Yeah, the Jets fought and clawed their way to a victory. And this team was 7-4 last year, 7-3, and lost, I think, their final 6 games of the season. So there's talent. And maybe when you look at younger rosters or teams trying to push their way into the playoffs that haven't been in recent years, these are the types of ugly wins that matter. They count at the back end of the season. They're also, on the flip side, can be the ones where you're like Jacksonville a couple years ago. Wow, if we wouldn't have laid a complete egg in Jacksonville, the Bills might have had home field advantage and 13 seconds would have been in a different place and yada, 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 or whatever. That's where that is. The special teams, you talk about that. Some issues showed their head in the preseason about special teams, and Sean McDermott was asked about it after the game, and he said he's concerned. He thinks there should have been a lot more bodies just down the field. The punt was in the middle of the field, so there were some issues there. Tyler Bass, he gets into overtime, but it was dramatic. Yeah, 50 yards is no easy chip shot, but he doinks it in and seemingly going against all geometry or physics or any sort of science. I don't know how the ball, the way it was tumbling and where it hit on the upright, was able to still go through the upright was pretty miraculous here. But there's, again, this is where we say you can distribute blame to multiple places beyond Josh Allen, and that's true and it's fair. And special teams would be one of them, and I'm sure we may get to it here shortly, but the Bills' run defense would probably be another.
Yeah, I was going to get to that next. I just kind of got sidetracked with the special teams there when we were talking about overtime, but we'll start with the Bills' run defense, John, because, again, as I go through my notes, it's, horrible this, horrible that. Run D for Bills, not good. And it was Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook, John, were both seemingly having their way. I think you tweeted out at one point, why don't you just hand the ball off to Breece Hall every time? And I couldn't agree more with that. That was how they were moving the ball down the field constantly.
Breece Hall was great. And just from a human standpoint, for a guy to bounce back in his first game after suffering a torn ACL a year ago and look that explosive, really encouraging as a Jets fan, if you're on that side of things, and for the Jets themselves to say, oh, I thought they got Dalvin Cook as a way to maybe allow Breece Hall to ease his way back in. No. Dalvin Cook's the number 2 back here. He's maybe more of a change of pace or whatever you want to call it at this stage of his career. This is Breece Hall's team from the running back standpoint, but I will give the Bills a little bit of credit. Breece Hall broke off 2 really long runs to start. He had 2 carries for 109 yards to start the game. He finished with 10 for 127. So after early in the game, the Jets won. For some reason, I still don't understand. We're not giving him the ball as much as they should have once Aaron Rodgers left the game and Zach Wilson was in. Then the Bills also kind of held him in check there. I mean, let me do the math. 18 yards on 8 carries the rest of the way after he broke off that 83-yard run. He was pretty good in the passing game. He had 1 catch for 20 yards. That's where I think Dalvin Cook was pretty good. He had 3 for 26, including a 15-yard play on a reception there. Cook overall 13 for 33, not very good, especially when 10 of that came on 1. So the Bills' run defense is an area that they need to shore up. Guys I spoke with in the locker room admitted that. Sean McDermott saying spacing. You'll hear run fit, gap integrity, and I think even an alignment on one of them, maybe the long run from Breece Hall, which I don't know whose fault that would be. I'm not going to speculate. There was a new play caller in the middle of the Bills defense. So if there's any sort of alignment or issues in that capacity, maybe that's just getting used to a new guy, a young player who didn't see any action in the preseason, being the guy mainly operating things over there from a mechanics standpoint down to down. So something to look at, but also I think maybe you look at the final numbers and say, my God, 127 yards and 10 carries, and he had an 83-yard run. Yeah, that's bad, but I think they got better as the game went on.
Yeah, on the flip side, John, Leonard Floyd looks like a great pickup for the Bills. Him and Gregory Rousseau looked really good out there. And Matt Milano, again, he's someone he's making plays, John. He's flying in, making tackles in the backfield. He's getting interceptions. I think when you look at that part of the defense and what they put out there, that's the good news as we start to move forward, is that A, the pass rush, the front four getting there. B, Matt Milano is still Matt Milano.
Matt Milano was the best player on the field for the Bills tonight. Offense, defense, special teams. He was absolutely incredible. He was flying around in the run game, in the pass game. He had the interception. We were joking in the press box that Matt Milano doesn't say anything, and then the guy amazingly gets a taunting penalty for talking smack on top of Zach Wilson on the field. That's probably more words that he said to Zach Wilson than maybe I've heard from Matt Milano since he came to the Bills years and years ago. But he looked everything like a first-team All-Pro linebacker, so really encouraging and good to see from him. And you mentioned Leonard Floyd. We all wondered what the Bills' pass rush would look like with the front four, the defensive front, without Von Miller. It was an area that was not up to par and was not good enough at the back end of last season. I think that contributed to some of their issues on the defensive side of things. They signed Leonard Floyd late in the offseason, get him in their OTA's minicamp, and you wonder, okay, they chose this route over another offensive weapon or something like that. He was fantastic. 1.5 sacks for 10.5 yards. He seemed to be disruptive even when he wasn't getting to the quarterback. He was phenomenal there. I think he also helped open things up for other guys. Greg Rousseau was also pretty good there. Jordan Phillips got a sack. Ed Oliver got half a sack. So the defensive front is something that I would give really, really high marks for. And yes, you can put the caveat that the Jets' offensive line is not very good, and I'll agree with you there. But as we noted on the podcast before this, either was the Bengals' offensive line with a bunch of backups last year in that playoff loss, and they got zero pressure on Joe Burrow. So you just got to do it against whoever's in front of you. And if you're going to take any silver lining out of this terrible, terrible loss by the Bills, it should be, in my opinion, that the Bills' defensive front looked great.
Yeah. Garrett Wilson, you got to give him credit. Tre'Davious White going up against him, John. How does Trey White look in this opener? Any different than he did last year when he came off of the knee surgery?
I wasn't focusing or able to focus a lot on just one particular player on defense. I will say this, and I think we discussed this going into the game as well. What do you do with Tre'Davious White? Or maybe I wrote it in my pregame article here previewing the game. I wanted to see what the Bills do with Tre'Davious White. Prior to the knee injury, it was a set it and forget it. He was going to shadow the other team's best wide receiver. You just didn't even think about it. And most of the time, that wide receiver was a non-factor for the game. After the knee injury, where is Tre'Davious White now at a full offseason, removed from it now almost 2 years come Thanksgiving? Where do the Bills view him with his game? He was shadowing Garrett Wilson from the jump in this game, and Garrett Wilson, 5 catches for 34 yards. And Trey was in fantastic position on that touchdown. It was a miraculous catch. It was kind of fluky. I mean, you got to give Wilson credit, but Trey tipped it from the jump, and Wilson was able to maintain control. I think a positive sign that he was put on Garrett Wilson. And yes, the quarterback play from Zach Wilson was not great. So maybe if Aaron Rodgers is in the game, maybe it's a little more of a taller task for Trey, but you play who you got to play. And Garrett Wilson, I think, was far more limited with Tre'Davious White on him than maybe he would have a year ago when Trey wasn't full speed.
Man, you got to wonder how this game plays out, just if Aaron Rodgers didn't go down early in this game, would it have been closer? We talked with Fred on the post-game show a little bit about this. You're going up against one of the greatest quarterbacks ever in the NFL, and all of a sudden he's not in the game anymore, and you're going up against a former first-round pick who's basically been labeled a bust. Do you let your guard down on both sides of the ball? Was that even a factor in this?
The guys said no after the game. Not that I necessarily feel they would ever admit that. The only thing I got was defensively, Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson are different players. The one thing I will say that would maybe give you just a little insight onto at least how the Bills viewed him is Sean McDermott said after the game, listen, no disrespect to Zach Wilson. He's not Aaron Rodgers from an experience standpoint, even alone. So that's where Sean McDermott even said, when we go into the locker room 13-3 or whatever it was, they're thinking, you just don't turn the ball over, we're going to win the football game. And then they turned the ball over and they lost the football game. So I think it would be natural to say, we don't have to do much here. I was surprised and didn't particularly like it when the Bills, 4th and short, after Rodgers had gone out, they were deep in the Jets' territory. They decided to kick a field goal to get on the board 3-0. I looked at it as saying, you're facing Zach Wilson. Just go. Go step on their throat right now. So I don't know what happened. You would almost think that Allen would understand he doesn't have to play Superman ball with Zach Wilson at quarterback as opposed to Aaron Rodgers. Whatever it may be, I'm sure some of that might have crept in. But then when the game was hanging around, those guys had to look at themselves and say, what in the world is going on? What the heck are we doing? And then you know what happens, Kevin. We've seen it so many times, especially in the National Football League. You let any team, regardless of their quarterback, regardless of the talent, disparate, difference between teams, you let a team hang around enough, they can get you, and that happened tonight.
That was the definition of letting a team that's not on your level hang around and beat you in really an embarrassing fashion, John. I think it was the Bills' first drive of the second half where Allen had his second deep interception where they were knocking on the door of even a field goal. And I think you get that field goal there, the whole dynamic of the game would have changed. Instead, you have Allen throwing another deep ball down the middle of the field to Stephon Diggs in double coverage, and then we all know what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how many more ways I can kind of sift through what was just a peculiar Josh Allen performance, and it's going to be something that I think you would normally say maybe you just throw it out. But I think because of the stage that it was on and how truly uncharacteristic it was for Josh to make this level of mistakes and these many mistakes, I think that's where it kind of is really even more amplified. And the fact that it came against a Jets team without Aaron Rodgers week 1, that this is a game that in a division you expect to be tight, especially considering what you saw from not only the Miami Dolphins, but the Patriots pushed the Philadelphia Eagles pretty well yesterday as well. So now this 4-team division that you thought was maybe a 3-team race, I'm not saying New England's going to push to win the division, but they're not going to be a push over like maybe some viewed them to be. So anytime you get even just one little note behind anyone in this division, it's a big deal. And this was a missed opportunity for the Bills to start off the season right and not already play catch up.
Missed opportunity, as Deion Dawkins said, take it and flush it. I think maybe they need to look at it a little bit longer before flushing it to try and get right with the Oakland Raiders. Oakland Raiders, John. Holy smokes. Las Vegas Raiders coming up next. After the first week of the season, John, you have the Chiefs losing. You have the Bengals losing. Your whole AFC that was supposed to be this big, tough conference with up-and-comers, all the top dogs looked like garbage the first week, including the Bills.
Well, But Kansas City has an excuse. They didn't have Travis Kelce or Chris Jones. The Bengals somewhat have an excuse. Joe Burrow, still maybe with the calf, not 100%. The weather was trash. And I would say the Detroit Lions and the Cleveland Browns are a better football team than an Aaron Rodgers-less New York Jets here. Bengals looked the worst of anyone. I would say that, though. As bad as the Bills looked, it's when I think the one thing that can maybe help temper the angst and anxiety by Bills fans is if there's one player that you would have confidence in to instantaneously and immediately next week flip the switch and right the wrongs of tonight, it would be Josh Allen. So if Josh Allen was the biggest issue tonight, I think you got to feel pretty good that there is no way you would imagine Josh Allen would be the big problem that would hold the Bills back next week, especially against the Vegas Raiders.
And especially at home in front of Bills Mafia, and we'll get you ready for that game coming up in the middle of the week on Wednesday with the next Buffalo End Zone podcast, other podcasts coming your way throughout the week as well. So Bills 0-1 to start the season, 22-16 loss to the Jets at MetLife Stadium. They are back in Orchard Park coming up this coming Sunday. For Jon Scott, I'm Kevin Carroll. As always, everybody, thanks for joining us.